Hello everyone, my name is Stanley St. Rose, and today we're going to be talking about How to Tame a Wild Tongue, written by Gloria Anzaldua. Now, before I go into the summary analysis of this work, please remember to leave a like, subscribe, and or a comment so that the channel can continue to grow. In this essay by Gloria Anzaldua, we learn about language and how language can be impacted within the United States. In this essay, we begin by looking at Gloria Anzaldua. She pretty much gives us this memory when she was at the dentist, and while the dentist was working on her teeth, her tongue kept on getting in the way, and from that, you kind of get the idea of how to tame a wild tongue. And so, Exagero uses this to talk about language and how language can be impacted within the United States. In the United States, standard English is expected at school, at work, and places of higher education. And so, if you are coming from a country that uses Spanish as a primary language, when you come to live in the United States, you're pretty much taught to forget about your language and to adapt to the American way of life and to use English to speak and to communicate with those around you. So, throughout the essay, Exagero is kind of showing us how this impacts culture and how this impacts her and how this impacts the way in which people can communicate with one another in the Spanish community and in the American community. There's different dialects and different codes when you speak to people. In school, Exagero shows us that you are taught to speak proper English. At home, you speak Spanish, and there's different forms of Spanish, different dialects of Spanish. There's countries around the world that use Spanish as their primary language, and just because you can speak one version, that doesn't mean you can understand other versions at 100%. So she kind of shows us throughout the essay that when she's with her friends, she speaks a certain way. When she's in Texas, certain parts of Texas, she speaks a certain way. When she's at school, she speaks English, and sometimes she speaks Spanglish. And there's so many different ways that she communicates with people, and she shows us that it's kind of like your freedom in terms of how you speak is taken away from you. Your tongue is pretty much controlled, because if you are in a setting where proper English is expected and you start speaking Spanglish, people are going to look down on you, and people are going to frown on that. And so, because of societal expectations, you have to speak a certain way to perhaps keep your job or to get good grades in school or to keep your parents happy. Freedom in terms of how you speak, it's in of a way restricted, because everybody expects something different from you. She even gives us an excerpt or an example where she uses a certain word in Spanish amongst her friend and amongst her family members, and that makes them embarrassed because she didn't use the right word. And this is something that a lot of people can relate to, because if you are coming from a foreign country and you come into the United States, sometimes people look at you the wrong way because you have a heavy accent or you're not pronouncing certain words right. So it's something. This essay is something that I think anybody can relate to and see how it affects multiple different cultures. Because when you're in the United States, you're being taught 24/7 by what you watch on TV. When you're at school, when you're at work, you have to speak properly, and it affects your life in several different ways. So throughout the essay, we see the reactions of different people, of school teachers, of how she was punished, and how she wants to speak, because she wants to have her freedom in how she communicates with people. Society just doesn't like a wild tongue, and so society controls it in many different ways through the words we use and how we communicate. You see that one interesting thing that comes up is that slang words, in several different places, when people speak slang, it's just totally frowned upon. But in certain, I guess you can say, laid back communities, when you use slang, it's okay. It's expected from you. So there's code switching, and that's something that Exaldra covers within this essay, that you have to switch codes when you are communicating in America. Depending on what group you're in, you kind of have to switch codes to communicate properly. And this has a lot. This has a lot to say about even gender, about cultural norms, about the impact it has on your personal culture, because your language, your primary language, is in of a way the key to your culture. And if you are being taught not to use it, and if you're in America, if you're living in America and you're being taught that that is not the way, the American way, it can have a severe impact on how you view your culture. So Mzaldua talks about, towards the end of the essay, she kind of talks that, one day, people of Hispanic culture, or people of Hispanic descent, they will have the freedom one day to speak the way that they want to in their own Spanish dialects. No matter if it's like Spanglish or different forms of Spanish. She pretty much, it's kind of like a hopeful ending that one day, people of Hispanic descent, people of Hispanic culture, they will have that freedom one day to speak the way that they want to. In terms of like analysis and the significance of this is that throughout the essay, we see Exaldua switch from different dialects of Spanish and even English to get her point across. And while I was reading this essay, even though she was switching from English to Spanish and from different dialects of Spanish, I could still understand what's happening in the essay and what point she was trying to convey and get across. So, when you read this essay, when you're going through this essay, you really have to think about it and look through it, because the communication is still there. I can understand what she's saying. I can understand what she's talking about, even though I don't speak Spanish. So one of that's a very important thing that is brought up within this essay. So it's not about communication, because people can understand her, people can see what she's saying. It's just there is this cultural norm in America that you have to speak English, and it has to be proper, because if you don't speak proper English, it's frowned upon. If you speak slang, it's frowned upon. In professional settings, in school settings, it's standard English. That's what's expected from you. And if you don't speak it, you're an outsider basically. So it's something that it impacts culture. It impacts the way that people behave, and it impacts the way that people speak. And it just says a lot about the way that American culture can impact other cultures. So it even brings up this question of, are we truly a melting pot? Because if America was truly a melting pot, every culture would have the freedom to speak whatever language they want, because we say all the time that America is a mixture of every different culture on earth, but when everybody's being forced to speak one language, are we really trying to be a melting pot, or are we just trying to force everyone to be exactly the same thing? So that is my summary analysis of How to Tame a Wild Tongue by Gloria Anzaldua. Please remember to leave a like, subscribe, and or comment, and I'll see you guys in the next video.